of my conversations with African-American voters, African-American Democratic donors, there isn't going to be a big change in the support that Joe Biden has based on the remarks that he made on Friday. I will say there was a collective gasp at the idea that Joe Biden had the hubris to say that African Americans aren't black enough and that he would be a person as a white man to tell African Americans how to be African American. That was definitely seen as not okay. And his apology was needed based on the reporting that I have. But that apology was given swiftly.
That, by the way, is a black reporter. Now, you heard her say collective gasp, because it's the white man telling black people, you're not black enough. Implication, a black person can tell black people they're not black enough. That's not a problem. Remember this?
Because if you're going to come to this table, and for all of you that have aspirations of running for office, for whatever lived experience and identity that you represent, if you are not prepared to come to that table and to represent that voice, don't come. Because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't need Muslims that don't want to be a Muslim voice. We don't need queers that don't want to be a queer voice.
How, pray tell, is that any different than what Joe Biden said, except it came from a black person? How's that any different? Now, a lot of people think that Barack Obama walks on water to the black community. Let's remember, he was perceived by political leaders in Chicago not only as an outsider, not only as somebody who's a carpetbagger from Hawaii, not only somebody who's elite who teaches at University of Chicago and went to Harvard, but as somebody who was not black enough. Here's a piece written by a longtime local Chicago writer named John Cass. He talks about an alderman named Tim Evans, 4th Ward. And the things that Tim Evans and others said about this young man named Barack Obama, who was trying to take Bobby Rush's job away from him. Bobby Rush, as a former Black Panther, member of the House, still is in the House. Quote, former Evans alderman and now U.S. Bobby Rush, who once said Obama wasn't black enough to challenge him, has had a long career. Barack Obama even complained about how he was characterized as not black enough. He was crushed in the race. He was then a state senator from Illinois. And here's what he said, quote, after he lost. When Congressman Rush and his allies attack me for going to Harvard and teaching at the University of Chicago, they're sending a signal to black kids that if you're well educated, somehow you're not keeping it real. End of quote. And remember what he said Obama did at Howard University?
Be confident in your blackness. One of the great changes that's occurred in our country since I was your age is the realization there's no one way to be black.
Let's turn to the Senate race a few years ago that Michael Steele engaged in. Michael Steele later on became the chair of the RNC. He ran for Senate in Maryland. At campaign rallies, activists threw Oreo cookies at him. A local black Democratic leader, when told about this, says, well, it's a legitimate issue as to whether or not he's a sellout. It's a legitimate issue as to whether or not he is an Uncle Tom. And you know who called him an Uncle Tom and used Uncle Tom? The head of the Senate, state Senate in Maryland. His name is Mike Miller, and he's white. And this white guy said publicly that Michael Steele was an Uncle Tom. Now, the head of the Senate, president of the Senate, Mike Miller, who made the statement later on, apologized for it. But the other Democrats in Maryland who were echoing it never apologized. So here you have a party where black and white leaders are referring to Michael Steele, the Republican candidate, as an Uncle Tom, where Barack Obama was maligned as not black enough by people like Bobby Rush, who's still there, Ayanna Pressley recently, it was just last year, where she said, we don't need any more brown faces or black faces who don't want to be brown or black voices. That was just last year. The point I'm making is what Biden said is standard 101 Democratic dogma. If you don't feel a certain way, if you don't believe that race and racism are responsible for everything, if you don't feel that blacks are still being abused by institutional, systemic, structural racism, then you are a sellout. You are an Uncle Tom. That's just Democrat 101.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Remember what Harry Reid said?
I don't know how anyone of Hispanic heritage could be a Republican, okay? So I need to say more.
And that is why you're finding all of these Democrats defending what Joe Biden said. What are they supposed to say? He shouldn't say that if you don't feel a certain kind of way, you're not black, when we've been saying it for years?
You know, I'm a little revved up, okay, because this is a distraction. Vice President Biden spoke to his comments on the Breakfast Club. He apologized, he clarified, he said he shouldn't have been so cavalier, but we need to move on and talk about the issues and what's really at stake here.
He shouldn't have been so cavalier. All he is doing is saying the same crap that you guys say all the time. What did Lonnie Guinier, Bill Clinton's first choice for Civil Rights Division on the DOJ? She talked about blacks being authentic and inauthentic and referred to, if I'm not mistaken, Clarence Thomas as being an inauthentic black. Thomas Sowell, inauthentic black. You've been saying it for decades. All Biden did is parrot what he always hears you guys say. One of Biden's top aides is a woman named Simone Sanders. She was a top aide to Bernie Sanders 4 years earlier. And she's always playing the race card, always talking about how blacks are being aggrieved by institutional, systemic, structural racism. You don't think she said to Joe Biden privately, you know, anybody black who hasn't decided whether or not he wants you or Trump, he ain't really black. You don't think Biden hasn't heard that over and over and over again? And so he gets loose, says the same thing, and gets hammered?
The vice president shouldn't have said it. He apologized for it. But I really think the gall and the nerve of President Trump.
I believe that Joe Biden was incorrect in saying the statement, you ain't black.
Oh, for crying out loud. That's Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile is the one who said when she was the campaign chair of Al Gore that the Republican Party has a white boy attitude. This thing on? And here she is lecturing Joe Biden for saying the same thing. Has Ayanna Pressley apologized for what she said?
Because if you're going to come to this table, and for all of you...
Have you demanded that she apologize? No. Did Nancy Pelosi say she should apologize? No. Did Chuck Schumer say she should apologize? No.
...that have aspirations of running for office, for whatever lived experience and identity that you represent, if you are not prepared to come to that table and to represent that voice, don't come. Because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't need Muslims that don't want to be a Muslim voice. We don't need queers that don't want to be...
Has she apologized? Did she apologize?
I'm sorry.
Did she apologize? Has she apologized?